Obsession? The film opens in a diner, where a young man named Bear Bailey is practicing with a waitress over how to confess his feelings to his childhood friend and longtime crush, Nikki Freeman. While the waitress thinks it's sweet, Bear's best friend Ian thinks it's corny. Bear just wants some alone time with Nikki, but they are all going to trivia night later with Ian and their other friend Sarah. When Bear goes home, he finds his cat Sandy dead, as she had accidentally gotten into his oxycodone. Bear puts her body in a garbage bag and then cries in his room. Bear later talks to Nikki on the phone, as she tells him that she is planning to put in her 2 weeks' notice at their job. He overhears her saying she dropped a crystal necklace down a sewer drain. Bear goes to a shop to buy her a replacement necklace, but then sees something called a one-wish willow, which he also purchases. Bear joins Nikki, Ian, and Sarah for trivia night. Afterwards, Bear drops Nikki off at home. He wants to confess his feelings to her, but he is too awkward, and he refers to her as Freaky Nikki, a nickname she despises. When she asks Bear if he likes her, he just denies it. After Nikki goes back inside, Bear takes out the one-wish willow and wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone in the world. Nikki suddenly reappears and offers to go home with Bear, saying she feels bad because her dad is dying of cancer. When they get home, Nikki asks Bear to sleep with her. They start getting physical until she suddenly pulls back in terror, claiming that there is something behind Bear. In the morning, Bear finds that Nikki made a memorial for Sandy by taking her body out of the trash and putting it on the kitchen floor, which just disturbs Bear. Nikki thinks she took something that has been making her act weird. Eventually, Bear and Nikki start dating, which confuses Ian and Sarah for how sudden it feels. While the two are out at dinner, Bear gets a call from Ian. He tells Bear that he's done some digging and learned that Nikki's dad is completely healthy, and Nikki doesn't even have a good relationship with him. Furthermore, Ian says that Sarah told him that she and Nikki talked about Bear, and she just saw him as a little brother. When Bear goes to ask Nikki the truth about her dad, she starts to yell and throw a tantrum in the middle of the restaurant until Bear calms her down. They later go back to his place, while Nikki doesn't seem to be in control of herself. At night, Nikki stands in the corner creepily, watching Bear sleep. When he tries to leave the bed, she screams at him to stay with her. The next day, Bear is getting ready to leave for work, but sees that Nikki has duct taped the whole front door. She gives him a lunchbox to bring to work, then stands by the door just smiling and peeing herself. At work, Bear is talking to Sarah before taking a bite of the sandwich and finding a note from Nikki that says, "How's the verdict, cat?" Bear lifts the bread and sees Sandy's paw, causing him to vomit. In his car, Bear calls the number for the one-wish willow and speaks to a representative that tells him the wish cannot be altered or undone, and only ends when the person who made the wish dies. When he returns home, he finds Nikki standing in the same place she was before, covered in urine, vomit, and feces. Ian expresses concern for Bear and invites him to a party. Bear tries to go without Nikki, but she protests enough that he brings her along, to Ian's chagrin. The party plays a game of drunk Jenga, which takes a turn when Nikki goes up and recites an incestuous monologue of Hansel and Gretel that makes everyone uncomfortable. When Bear goes up, his block reads, "Kiss the person to your left," which happens to be Sarah. Nikki pulls Sarah out of the way and sits in her place, so Bear has no choice but to kiss her. The real Nikki seems to snap out momentarily and begins stabbing herself in the face with a broken beer bottle. Bear goes to the hospital to try to get Nikki help, but he is denied for some reason. Bear brings Nikki home and gets a text from Sarah to meet her. Bear goes to meet Sarah in her car. She tells him that Ian and Nikki were hooking up on and off again for several years, and Ian thinks that Nikki is dating Bear to get back at him. It is also implied that Sarah likes Bear, But before either of them can act on their feelings, Nikki comes charging toward the car. She smashes the window and then repeatedly slams Sarah's face onto a brick until she's dead and her face is gone. A terrified Bear helps Nikki move Sarah's body. Bear goes back to the antique shop to get another one-wish willow to try and undo the wish, but he is unable to break the willow in half like the first time since he already used his wish. He goes to Ian's home to try and get him to make the wish for Bear to have never made the wish. But Ian sarcastically wishes for $1 billion, and money instantly starts raining from the ceiling. Bear goes back to the house to find that Nikki propped up Sarah's corpse in the living room. He wants to get Nikki to reverse the wish by giving her a willow, but she plans to shoot him and herself. Ian comes in out of nowhere, leading to Nikki shooting him in the head. Bear locks himself in the bathroom and decides it's time to end it. He almost shoots himself in the head, but instead overdoses on the same oxycodone that killed Sandy. When Bear exits the bathroom, Nikki has already broken the willow so that Bear can be in love with her. They hug each other until Bear collapses. Nikki holds him in her arms and almost shoots herself in the head until the wish wears off. Nikki snaps back to normal and begins screaming hysterically at all the dead bodies around her.